suspicious sometimes. The more I know, the less I understand. All the things I thought I knew, I'm learning again. I've been trying to get down to the heart of the matter, but my will gets me. And my thoughts seem to scatter, but I think it's about forgiveness. Forgiveness, even if you don't love me anymore.
All right, we're getting down to the heart of the matter now. This is Don Henley of Eagles fame. Here we go. Let's talk about blood pressure first. I think it's where we left off in our notes, cardiovascular notes. Letter H, blood pressure. All right, we measure our blood pressure with this cuff. You've probably seen these before, had yours measured with it, but you have a cuff. Hang on, I want to get rid of that. Okay. No blank spots. There we go. You got a cuff with a little air pressure gauge on it. You puff it up with air, exerts more pressure. You can listen to a stethoscope, hear the pulse. There's other ways to do it. A lot of them are automatic nowadays. You can go into Walmart and whatever. But basically what it does, it measures on the scale in milligrams of mercury how much pressure is on it. So let's look at this for just a second. Basically, when we put the cuff on and we puff it up with air, originally you go up to a high pressure, usually about 160 or thereabouts, and what you put so much pressure in it basically acts like a tourniquet. It cuts off all blood flow. Notice there's no blood flow, okay? Then they gradually let a little bit of air escape, turn a little knob here, and let air gradually escape, and the air pressure goes down. Now, say you had a blood pressure of 120. Once it gets down to 120, the high blood pressure, when your heart's beating, will start to push through because it's more than 120, okay? And it makes noises we call the Karatov sounds, Korotkov sounds, okay? I believe he was Russian, but anyhow, Korotkov sounds, and that's when you're hearing the high pressure blood under your pulse barely getting through, and so you can usually kind of feel a little throbbing over here in your elbow, all right? So I mean, you can actually hear or feel it in your body when they're taking your blood pressure, and that's when blood starts to come through. Okay, under high pressure, but under low pressure, in between beats, it's not enough pressure to go through. So some blood is coming through, and you're hearing sounds. Now, eventually, as you get lower and lower, say your bottom number of your blood pressure is 70, like 120 over 70. The bottom number means that the pressure is so low, it's just letting all the blood through. When you hear blood through, when all the blood goes through, you don't hear any sounds. The sounds of Korotkov go away, and then you don't hear anything as the blood just continues regular circulation. Okay, so basically there are two numbers. The top number, which is called your systole or systolic pressure, okay, and that is the high, that means to contract, and that's your high blood pressure, and that is when your ventricles are contracting and pumping. Your blood doesn't just flow at a steady rate, it's in little spurts. Your heart beats, pushes faster, and it kind of slows down, and the next beat speeds back up. So it's kind of a jerk, stop, spurt, stop. It's kind of a jerky movement, all right? And so basically your two pressures, your top number is the systolic pressure, or systole, when your heart's in systole, which means it's contracting, and the bottom number is in diastole, or diastolic blood pressure, and that's in between the beats. The blood pressure your blood exerts on the artery walls in between beats. Okay, and we always measure blood pressure in your arteries, or your arterial blood pressure, because that's where the pressure is the highest. The veins are when the blood's coming back and it's under a lot less pressure, so it's not enough to really measure it. Usually, if we're talking about high blood pressure, we're talking about the top number getting too big, usually over 140 or so. Okay, if it's under 120 or less, that's good. But if it's more than that, then eventually they may put you on high blood pressure medicine and so forth. And we'll talk more about high blood pressure later, but that's kind of an introduction. All right, now, we're talking next, we're talking about systemic circulation going to the whole body and pulmonary circulation going to the lungs. We need to talk about the cardiac circulation, because just like the rest of your body, your heart muscle has to receive oxygen, and the blood passing through all these arteries and all these atrium and ventricles, it has an endocardium, the smooth, slick inside layer, and it does not allow oxygen and food, nutrients, stuff go in and out. So they have to actually blood vessels that actually carry it out to the heart muscles. So this is looking at the heart from the back side, so it may look a little funny. So if the aorta is kind of in the back of the back, which is the front, and you can see these are the pulmonary veins coming in the back of the heart, kind of stuff like that. All right, and the coronary arteries carry blood. Right before it comes out of the aorta, there's a little spot where the blood comes out and it goes into the coronary arteries. Okay, and so it goes to the coronary arteries. Those will be all these red ones that go in. It carries blood to all these different parts of the heart. Okay, then it comes back, goes to capillaries, and it comes back in these veins. And eventually there's what's called the coronary sinus, where it collects all the blood from the heart, and then it just squirts it back into the right atrium to be repumped. So it just goes from the base of the aorta to the heart, and then comes back to the coronary sinus, back into the right atrium. So it's a little mini circulation that goes to the heart. Of course, it's very important because if you don't have blood to your heart, then it's kind of like your brain. Those two things, they don't have blood, then everybody else starts to die. So it's very important. If it gets blocked, if these get blocked, you can have a coronary, usually the arteries are getting blocked. It's going to be a coronary, we're talking about coronary or coronary heart attack, that's what we're talking about. As it blocks it, they don't get any oxygen, and the tissue starts to die, depending how long and so forth it is. Now, basically, anytime a cell dies from lack of oxygen, it is called an infarct. Okay, yes, got to pronounce that carefully. It is infarct. All right, and when that happens, it's going to be called an infarction. Okay, not an infarction, but an infarction or infarct. Okay, that means lack of oxygen. If it happens in the heart, then it's a myocardium infarction or a coronary heart attack. Okay, in other words, you're having a heart attack because there's lack of oxygen getting to your tissue, and depending on how much of it dies, then it could be how serious it is. Okay, now one of the problems with the heart, though, is when the muscle contracts, it contracts so hard that blood cannot flow into the capillary. So in between beats, blood rushes in the capillary, gets oxygen and stuff, and then when it beats, it stops flowing again, and then in between beats, it does it again. Okay, now if your heartbeat starts beating so rapidly that you don't have time for enough oxygen to get in there, you can get an infarct. Okay, and it causes an amount of pain. We talk about chest pains, all right, or sometimes you'll hear about people that say they have angina, all right, so it's angina, which has with the pain part, and it is called pectoris because it's going to be around your chest area, so it's going to be angina pectinis, which is a crushing heart pain that you feel because of that lack of oxygen, and that can be a signal of a heart attack. And like I said, if you have a real rapid heartbeat, there's not enough time for the blood to get in there, so that can be a problem also if that happens. Things that's interesting about your heart muscle is that it continues to beat without being told to by your nervous system. Your nervous system can speed it up or slow it down, but the actual heartbeat is controlled by signals in the heart. In fact, heart tissue can be removed from the heart, and if it's kept alive, it will continue to beat on its own. Okay, but in order for it to know when to beat, there has to be some kind of system. It's called the intrinsic. Intrinsic means inside. Conduction, it's conducting an electrical signal system. Or sometimes it's called the nodal, N-O-D-A-L, nodal system, because there's different nodes that send the signals out. Okay, and this is just a system that tells the heart when to contract. Okay, so even if your nervous system is not affecting the heart at all, it would still continue to beat, okay, because it controls its own. Now, the ultimate signal comes up here from the SA node called sinoatrial. Atrial have to do with the atrium because it's up here at the top. Sino, I believe, means at the top, but anyhow, sinoatrial node. All right, we usually call this the pacemaker. We say your heart has a pacemaker. We're really talking about the SA node, okay, and it sends a signal out. If yours gets messed up, you may have to get an artificial or implanted pacemaker to do this for you, okay. But yeah, it sends a signal out. It sends a signal to the atrium, the right atrium, and over to the left atrium. All right, and it also sends a signal down to the AV node, which is on the right side between the atrium and the ventricle, hence the atrioventricular node. Okay, the AV node right there. Now, if it sent that signal and started contracting right away at the ventricles, that would be a problem because you just had the atria starting to contract. So as it sends this message to the atrium, the signal right here at the AV node pauses, and that allows the atria to contract on both sides. Then it sends a signal, once they've contracted, pushed all the blood into the ventricles, then it sends a signal, and there's a bunch of different things here, the bundle of His and the Purkinje fibers and so forth. We don't want to worry about that too much, but it sends this signal out and it makes the ventricles contract at the same time. The timing is very important, and the sequence and everything, and if that gets off, all of those can cause problems. Okay, and so basically the pacemaker starts the heartbeat, sets the pace, tells the heart when to do it. Then it tells the atria to contract. It sends a message to the AV node, which pauses, lets the atria contract. Then it sends a signal to the ventricles, and they contract. And it just continues to do that over and over. Discoveries that really help people learn more about the heart is the electrocardiography. Cardio means heart. Graphy means to draw. Electro, you're drawing the electrical signals of the heart. And they found out that if you put sensors or little pads on your skin, you can pick up electrical signals or currents from the heart that it sends when it does this. All right, the diagram calling that is called the electrocardiogram. EKG or ECG. We spell cardio with a C. Originally, I believe in Germany, it was with a K. And so if you see EKG or ECG, either one are electrocardiograms, and they are measuring that. And this is what we see on the little monitors and all the hospital dramas. And if it flats, the idea of flatlining is of dying, because basically it's not beating. All right. So anyhow, that is it. Now, a couple things you need to know about that. This is on your worksheet. The P wave is the first little signal. There's one little signal. Then there's a whole bunch of signals that overlap, and it's called the QRS wave. Okay, and you have a whole bunch of stuff going on there. And then over here you have the T wave. All right. What's happening when these happen is, first of all, the SA node in the right atrium fires. Now, right after that, in this little time right here, the atria would contract. All right, and we drew it over here because there's not room over there, but right after that signal, the atria would contract. This is when the AV node is pausing and letting it do that. All right, then during the QRS, the SA node resets itself, so it'll be ready for the next heartbeat. It fired off, now it's resetting. Okay, and the AV node is firing. Okay, all right, and then right after that, the ventricles would contract. Notice there's not an electrical signal when they're contracting, it's right before they contract. All right, and then when the AV node resets itself, you just have another little bump over here and getting ready for the next heartbeat. Then the P wave, when the SA node fires, the atria contract. The AV node fires, but the SA node resets, and then the ventricles contract, and then the AV node resets itself, and just keep doing that over and over again, hopefully so that you do not become a flatliner. Familiar readouts, these are the EKGs of it. If you have a normal rhythm, you can see it just going pretty steadily. There's some things that can happen though. First of all, if you have ischemia, I-S-C-H-E-M-I-A, sounds like you're scheming to do something. Ischemia means that there's not enough blood getting to the heart. Okay, now if it does that, your heart may try to beat faster to make up for that, and it can lead to what we call fibrillation. Fibrillation just means your heart is trying to beat so fast that it's not really very effectively beating at all. It's just kind of shuddering. It's like someone in hysterics. Okay, I just can't talk, but they're just so excited they can't talk. Okay, and that's kind of what your heart's doing. Now, if you use a defibrillator, think of the paddle things and things, or the AEDs that people have around the school, their job is kind of like, just like someone coming in hysterics and someone just slaps them on the side of the head and says, hey, snap out of it. Okay, we're shocking them with a big shock, and hopefully that will reset their heart and snap out of it and become at a normal heart rate. Okay, now a normal heart rate, it can be anywhere from 60 to 100 beats per minute. A lot of times athletes and stuff may go down to 40, and that's very good. That the lower your number of beats per minute, that's usually considered a good thing. So if you're in that normal range. Now, if you have less than that, a very low number, it's considered bradycardia. Think of Tom Brady, who's been an athlete. He had a really healthy heart, so he probably has a very slow heart rate. Okay, so the condition is called, if you have less than 60 beats per minute, that's called bradycardia. Just for the record, that's usually not an issue. It's a good thing if you have a low heartbeat. Tachycardia, on the other hand, ooh, how tacky is that, is when your heart beats too fast, over 100 beats per minute. If it's a baby, that is normal, but for adults, that's fast. The main problem is tachycardia is not necessarily a problem unless if it gets out of control, it can lead to that fibrillation, in which case you will need the defibrillator to reset your heart. Okay, and that's why they have all the AEDs around the schools and stuff nowadays to help try to reset that. All right, and we'll stop right there, and we will come back and talk about cardiac output next time. I believe that should be the cutoff for the first quiz.